Hello there and welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be talking about the same subject we've talked about most of this week, that is FPV goggles. We're first of all going to take a look at the new information that we've had from HDZero on their upcoming HD FPV goggles. We've had some images shown as well as updated specs, and actually there's some new images that I'm going to share with you as well if you haven't seen them already. And then going to go back onto the subject that has kept us all busy, which is the Fat Shark Dominator FPV goggles alongside the WalkSnail FPV system. And I'm just going to try and catch you up on where we're at with this today. And then finally at the end, I'm going to give you some of my thoughts, having had now a bit more time to absorb all of this information, really take a step back and have a look at what has actually been going on. And I'm going to share with you my thoughts on that. Anyway, let's get on with it and let's hop in and take a look at the interesting stuff that we've got from HDZero first of all. So this week, Carl shared some of the first renderings and images of the upcoming HDZero goggles, as well as confirming some of the specs. Now, what we'll do first of all is take a look at that, but then I'm going to hop on to some of the updated images that have been shared, because whilst what Carl showed us looked very interesting, they have taken some feedback and they've gone away and actually shared some updated renderings based on that feedback, and we'll take a look at them as well. Now, hopping over to the specification first of all, what Carl has shared is that we're going to be getting a set of HD FPV goggles with OLED displays. They are going to be very, very high-end goggles. They're going to offer 1080p 90 frames a second, so they align with all of those other high-end goggles like the Fat Shark Dominator that have been announced as well. They're going to offer close to zero real-world latency, or as low as 4 milliseconds end-to-end glass-to-glass. And Carl is able to do that because they are taking out all of that extra circuitry that you don't need that is in place with the VRX and another set of goggles, such as the HDMI encoders, the transceivers. So they're able to actually reduce that latency down to pretty much the lowest that we've seen from any digital system. We have the goggles which have recessed SMAs, which we'll take a look at in a minute, 3 independently addressable fans, HDMI input and HDMI output, a combined 3.5mm headphone jack and microphone, as well as a 3.5mm analog input that also has deinterlacing as well. Now, if we hop to the original images that were shared, this was the initial renderings, and you can see the goggles themselves have a traditional style. They're not a big box goggle, they are a more traditional goggle. We have the 4 SMA antennas with 2 on the top and 2 on the front, and the front ones were countersunk. We have a power switch on the side with our power input, a fan control button which controls the anti-fogging as well as the internal cooling. We have a rotary control, and then if I flick to the next image, looking underneath, you have all of the inputs and outputs. We have a head tracker input, the firmware update port, analog AV in, HDMI in, moving over to the other side, HDMI out, the SD card underneath in a nice and easy accessible place, and that combined headphone and microphone jack. You can see here we have the knobs for the IPD and focus adjustment located underneath, and this is where we start to see some of the concern being highlighted over the design, in the sense of people saying that might be a bit easy to get knocked, as well as some concern over the countersunk SMAs as well. Now, after Carl released this, there was a huge amount of feedback and comments, and they've actually gone away and taken this design and looked at it again, and they've shared some more updated images, and Ryan has actually done that, which is here, showing some more new renderings which have a more smoother external casing, less sharp edges. You have a removable fan housing which now has the option for attaching a 3-way strap as well. The SMAs, I think, are slightly less countersunk on these as well. and they've made some adjustments to the knobs underneath, just making everything a little bit smaller. Now, what is really interesting here is we potentially have a set of goggles that are going to be the very best possible image quality on HDZero, but also on analog FPV as well, because Carl has taken that feedback that I gave him on the SkyZone 04Xs, which is these, where I was complaining about that interlacing behavior on analog, and he solved it in these goggles. He has literally taken that and ran with it and integrated fixes as part of it. I am super excited to see where these goggles actually end up, and I think they have done a very, very good job here. This final design for me, I think, looks about perfect, and you can now see that rail system on the front that they were showing as well, where the antennas will actually clip onto this on the top and the bottom. If I head back to the original post, which is the proper renderings of the initial one, you can see they've got that little slit down there on that image, and then the slit along the top there, which is designed for that rail system that's going to allow you to actually add on the antennas on the front. I know people are going to be asking, well, what is the situation with analog? There is no built-in analog receiver, but as I've said, it's got AV in, and they have shown renderings with an additional module on the side, so you will be able to stick that on or attach it to the goggles, allowing you to be able to actually have proper analog input like we have on traditional goggles. There's no bay though built in as standard. Now, there is a couple of other things that I haven't mentioned yet on the specs, which is worth mentioning. A, there is full support for Express LRS backpack functionality on these goggles, and there's going to be an add-on 2.4 gig Wi-Fi module available, allowing you to actually be able to connect it to external sources and do things like wireless streaming. Now, there is one thing I skipped over on this specifically, and that is this comment up here from them talking about the software. Now, these goggles are going to be running open source Linux. Not only have they spoken in the past about open sourcing parts of HDZero, but the software on these goggles is going to be fully open sourced as well. So people are going to be able to make changes to that and improve that as time goes on too. Not only is the software going to be open source, but Carl has also said he is looking to make the design of the casing for the goggles available as well, allowing people to even be able to do more development and actually design their own external casings for the goggles, allowing us to see really interesting different variations of this product. I have to say, what Carl has done here is simply astonishing. We have a high-end set of FPV goggles, which the spec states are going to be 1080p, 90 Hz, HDMI in, HDMI out, AV input for analog with proper deinterlacing. We're going to have that Wi-Fi functionality. You've got full control over the software via open source, and you have all the options you want around antenna configuration. It is super interesting just to see what people are going to do with this. And really, this is probably the first product I've seen in a long time that has been out and out community supported, but actually community designed as well, because not only is Carl asking for feedback, as soon as someone actually says, hey, we think this should be better, he takes that away and does it. He listened to what I and others have said on these goggles about the deinterlacing, and he's listened about the case design, and they've gone away again and actually looked at it and made some changes. Now, I have to say, I am super impressed and excited about what Carl has shown you. Time-wise, we are looking about September, October for general availability, and we should start to see the beta stuff land in people's hands around the middle of the year. Now, it is worth me mentioning that HDZero haven't actually made FPV goggles before, and if you are considering these, it is possibly worth holding back and waiting to see how things go, because whilst on paper they look for me to be the perfect FPV goggle, we do have to take that fact into account that they haven't done it before, and if you're not sure, just hang back. I will be reviewing these when they come, as will many others, and I'm sure you will get the lowdown on what they're actually like. I personally am not expecting any issues based on the information that Carl has shared and the way they've been releasing products. And whilst things have been held up because of the situation we found ourselves in around the world, overall, Carl has delivered on everything he's promised so far, and based on what I've seen, I see no reason that won't be the case here as well. Next, it's time to talk about the Fat Shark Dominator digital FPV goggles, but more importantly, WalkSnail. Now, there has been so much noise around this digital FPV system. However, what has somewhat been lost is what potential there is. Now, there is no question this launch has been sort of overshadowed, hyped, blown up, and it's had its issues for many reasons. The info that was shared was questionable, and the base core of the system that has been shown to us still remains in doubt. But if we put all of that to one side a minute and start thinking about what we have had out of this, it could actually be one of the best things to have happened to FPV for quite some time. DJI, when they released this system, put something on the market that was hands down better than everything else. Over 2 years later, it is still one of the best options on the market, if not the best option, if you want long-range FPV, whereas latency is not your major priority. HDZero has caught up far better than many would have predicted, and whilst it offers much better latency and very, very good performance, they are two different systems that don't perform the same because they are based off two different ways of doing the same thing, which is delivering digital information. If you want out-and-out latency, then it's HDZero. If you want out-and-out range at the expense of latency, then it's DJI. That isn't to say HDZero can't fly as far as DJI, because it can, and it's been proven. But there is different behaviors between them, and you can choose the one that best suits your needs. Whilst DJI developed a system which was very good, where they fell down was, as always, with DJI's support, development, and how they treated the system moving forward. The biggest criticism with this system has been the lack of bug fixes, the lack of development, and the fact that DJI pretty much ignore all feedback from the community with regards to this system. WalkSnail, though, now have an opportunity. They have a chance to come in and deliver a system that is very similar in DJI's performance. However, they have already said they're bringing 1080p, and they have shown they're bringing MSP DisplayPort or Canvas mode OSD to the system as well. If they did come into the market and do what they've said, which is deliver a system and develop it, it would be a very, very good thing for FPV, because we would no longer be restricted to just A2 systems, but B, DJI actually doing what we, the FPV community, want them to do. In the past, it has been so difficult to get DJI to do things, I ended up having to say, do not buy these goggles before they actually came out and put a fix in place for some of the issues on the V2. You could easily say DJI have pretty much abandoned the FPV community and simply dropped a product into the market and left it there. And if you think of it that way, it's hardly surprising someone like WalkSnail has come along and said, hey, we're going to give you something very similar, but we're going to take on board your feedback, listen to what you say, and try to give you what you want. And if they do that, there will be no one happier than me. Now, what we'll do next is hop over to the desktop and just look at a couple of bits of information that they've put out this week. They've sort of announced that there's going to be ready-to-fly drones coming with that WalkSnail FPV technology built in. The WalkSnail goggles are going to be coming, but they are behind the Fat Sharks. The Fat Sharks are going to launch first. And also, I just want to go through a bit of a statement that they put out and withdrew, but it does put a lot of interesting information out there as well. So let's hop over and take a look. So the first thing we'll look at is this news on there being ready to fly drones. And this is a post from WalkSnail with regards to Flywoo. And there's going to be the first avatar system drone will land soon, is what they say. So you can see that it is clear they have intention for not just releasing actual parts, but working with manufacturers and bringing whole systems too. You can see the WalkSnail goggle in the background as well as the quad in the front. Now, there has been a bit of news this week shared with dealers and stuff like this on the WalkSnail goggle, and that is it is going to be a bit behind the Fat Shark release. It looks right now like the Fat Shark goggle is the priority. My understanding is these goggles are designed in partnership with Fat Shark, being manufactured sort of with them. JB has covered this in the news if you want to see more info on that. But it looks like Fat Shark's goggle is going to be the first on the market, but WalkSnail VTX is, and then we will see the WalkSnail goggle come a little bit later. That was one piece of information which was very interesting, but there was also another one as well, which is this. And this is WalkSnail asking if they should make a VRX module for this system. So rather than just have to buy FPV goggles, you could actually have a VRX module as well. And I think that is a fantastic idea, and they should absolutely do it. Because here is why. If Carl's goggles at HDZero are as good as they look, I can tell you now, I would love to have those goggles with a WalkSnail receiver option, allowing me to cover every situation that I do. So for me, I think that is a fantastic idea. The next post I just want to share with you is this one here. Now, it's a little bit of a strange one because it was posted for a few minutes by WalkSnail and it was taken offline again. However, it does have a lot of interesting info. Now, the reason it was probably taken offline is it looks like it's been a conversion from Chinese to English, and some of the wording doesn't always make sense. I'm not going to read the whole post because it is massive, but it starts saying Joshua Bardwell tested the system last week at Rampage and the system was accepted by JB. I think what they mean by that was he gave his thoughts on it. The video was released again. It's a bit of a Chinglish translation, but they start to go on about the speculation as if we got help from DJI or if we reversed engineered the system, and they talk about that. And they've said that it makes their R&D team very happy if they're being compared to DJI. It is rather interesting when you go through it, and the basics are they again say their technology is not DJI, it's not based on DJI, it is something different, but they are talking about a lot of really good things here. They go on about DJI, about how good they are, a bit strange, quite a few comments about how good DJI is, but if you jump through it, there's some really interesting info in here, such as they want to work on a 1S Whoop system, not 1S. They are looking at options around fixed latency, and it just seems that they are very, very keen on developing this system. Now, it's easy for that to be said up front right now. At the end of the day, WalkSnail can say whatever they want. What counts is actions and what they actually deliver. And today we don't have a product, but that isn't to say that there isn't huge potential here, as I've said earlier. I do know that they have reached out to dealers this week. There's been comments to dealers from WalkSnail about getting the system in, and they've been sharing info there. I know they've reached out to a couple of developers on the Express LRS side of things, so I think there was a bit of communication either way, and they've spoke to them. So regardless of all of this noise, as I said earlier at the start, there is a massive opportunity here for a company to outdo what DJI did, but listen to the community as well. And I'm personally taking a lot more of an open-minded approach at this point moving forward on what we're going to see from them. There is no question there has been a massive amount of speculation around what technology WalkSnail are actually using. I put together a big post on my community page talking about the DJI chipset, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And the point I want to get across is there is nothing magical that DJI is doing that others can't do. Yes, they brought it first, but with enough time and money, and time really more than anything, there is no reason others can't replicate that or bring something very, very similar. When I say replicate, I'm not saying clone. What I'm talking about is basically develop a system that can look and behave very, very similar. Yes, WalkSnail appear to have replicated DJI's menu system on purpose, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the underlying chipsets and code are the same. If I hop back over to the desktop, on my community page, I put this big post talking about the P1 3 days ago, labeled the DJI P1 and S1 for FPV. It's not all that. And what I mean by this is I've seen lots of comments from people going, oh, it's impossible for other people to do this. It really isn't. The P1 is an Asic, or an application-specific processor, which has been designed to do what DJI need it to do. But it is nothing that others couldn't do with enough time. In fact, logic would dictate about now you would see someone do something similar. DJI have had this system in place for over 2 years. And whilst they are always at the forefront of technology, there is no reason someone couldn't have seen it and used that as inspiration for their system. Now, how much do you class something as clone or copy or a replication is really a complex subject. But the reality is people need to understand that DJI, whilst extremely good at what they do, are not the be-all and end-all, and there is no reason others could not achieve what they have done given enough time. And considering it's 2 years, I think actually they've done well to keep this sort of technology under wraps till now. If you're interested in checking out the article, it is on my community page and it's also on SUAS News as well. Gary posted it on there too, which was fantastic. I go into talking about the P1 and S1 variants, the Pigeon as well as the Sparrow. We go on to talking about the basics of the chipset, how it appears to be based off lead core. However, lead core aren't really in business anymore. And I just sort of talk about the very basics of where this chipset came from, its development and where it is today. And any comments people have about this being old technology need to be thrown away, because you need to understand this chipset is still used now in all of their latest drones, including the Mavic 3 and most likely the Mini 3 that has just launched. OcuSync is a core part of DJI's technology and this chipset is used as part of that. But you also need to understand it may not actually be their chipset. They just have used it as part of their technical package that they make when they build their drones. Now, I intend to do a separate video on this as well as talk a bit more, and I know another creator has got one coming over the next couple of days as well, so I would suggest checking that out when it releases too. But the very basics of this is, just because it looks and feels the same doesn't necessarily mean it absolutely is. I want to understand what's been done here, but take all of that out of the picture, and what we have is potentially a DJI style system without all of the drawbacks potentially of DJI. And that is a very, very good thing. Now, this all leaves one more question. What about DJI? Well, I'm not sure I really care about DJI anymore. If WalkSnail deliver what they've said, it basically replaces this system. We have HDZero with their new goggles. DJI have sat on their laurels and not delivered what the community asked for. There is no question this system has been fantastic. But if WalkSnail can do what they're alluding to do and deliver what they're saying, then we could have no reason to choose DJI, because we know they will give you a product that may not have the features you want, they may not fix the bugs, and they may not work or listen to the community. All WalkSnail have to do is walk in and have a system as good, but do all of that stuff better than DJI, and they're on to a winner. We know DJI is working on new products. We know there's a drone. I shared some images the other day. We know there is new goggles. But does that mean it really matters to FPV when someone else is going to take what they've done, but give it to us in the way we want it, rather than on DJI's terms, as it always is. I will obviously watch what they're doing and we will cover it, we will talk about it. But if WalkSnail do as they say, I'm really not sure DJI matter in FPV anymore. That's it from me on this update. If you have found this video useful, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. If you'd like to support the channel to get more information like this in the future, there are links to my Patreon as well as Buy Me a Coffee. I've started doing some new stuff on Patreon this week, including Mads Tech After Hours, where I have a video which I'm going to put on there once every week or so, where I sort of give a bit more background to some of the stuff I've been doing on the channel, as well as some of the subjects I've been talking about too. If you'd like to support us in other ways, not only do we accept Patreon, but there is Buy Me a Coffee as well, if you would like to donate to allow us to keep buying products such as this WalkSnail or Fat Shark system as it releases. So if you are interested in doing that, please do check it out. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you again soon.